What's up, everybody? Well, here to make a video about a number of things, and one thing I want to start out talking about is my sunglasses. How I basically have all the primary colors. And this is Mardi Gras. Looks a lot like my yellow ones, only with purple legs. I have red. I have yellow. I have dark blue. And I used to have turquoise until they broke and I had to fix them with tape. But they'll do when I absolutely have to have turquoise. And I also have some patriotic versions, and I have black. I have a black version of this. And so that's a lot of freaking sunglasses, and I have an orange one that's different for Halloween. And I have a different kind of purple one. So I am just a few pairs away from pretty much having every color in the rainbow. And I have green, but they just have green legs, black face, or something like that. So they're different, but they're green. Anyway, without further ado, I would like to, in this video, unbox a few things, and I decided not to actually cut the tape on screen because of how difficult that can prove to be. And I want to say that I already had a Terence and a Tinkerbell doll, and then I bought another Tink with built-in green tights, and I have another 8-inch Tink with the one I think named Rosetta, the redhead. And so I recently bought me yet another Terence. He's more on the 1/12 scale, like Cedric. And he has a darker blonde hair, but he's wearing all his correct clothing instead of some makeshift clothing because he was nude. And what I really wish is that they'd have made an 8 or 9-inch Terence, like the 8 or 9-inch Tinkerbells. And unfortunately, I think they did make something very similar in another country, and the box was even printed in another language. They had that one token boy Terence. He was like twice this tall, but unfortunately, when he was available, and he had like some tights that were basically his legs, brown legs, built-in shoes, which was fine by me. You know, he was more in the 1/6 scale. Everybody that was selling him either wouldn't ship to the US or he was valued at several $100s. And then I think they still may not want to ship to the US. So you're kind of SOL for wanting a Terence doll that was about twice this tall, 9 inches. So I'm stuck with the little 4-inch Terence. And I have 2 of him, so I guess that's good enough. The other thing I want to share is, without sharing my address, I also bought some elf dolls. They're about the size that I wish Terence could be. And the reason, so I got a black version and a brown, a brown version and a white version. He's not black. But they both have blonde eyebrows. And that's odd because it's usually the other way around. They usually default to more of a brunette-looking eyebrow, as you can see from Terence. I don't know if you can see that. But I really do think, you know, they don't like to vary the doll design by much. Simply because that costs money. You know, every time you create an additional mold or an additional anything, that costs money. And so you kind of want to do, let's see, I'll try not to get him on the receipt. What I'm going to do, you see, they're Target dolls, which is why they're so cute. Yet I never got to buy any because the only way I can have something from Target is to order it online, secondhand. And that's sad. Because, no, we don't have a Target, but when we did, you see how they're different colors. One of them's almost patriotic looking. See, he could almost be a 4th of July elf. And he's a Christmas elf. But can't really buy anything from Target. Because when we did have a Target, my parents were so afraid of the men using the women's restroom, which I've never encountered, that I wasn't allowed to shop. So, my 2 elf boys. And my Terence with elf ears. I've always had a thing about, I like boy dolls with elf ears. And the reason I bought those 2 Christmas elves, which were on sale because it isn't Christmas, but in about 7 months it will be. Less than 7 months. Or no, about 7 months it will be, but less than 7 months I'll be getting ready for it. But I've always liked boy dolls with elf ears, you know, simply because I think that, you know, I really hate this trend towards feminizing everything. You know, I hate the way boys shows are forced to include girls in every episode, whereas girl shows can sideline the boys to the point where, you know, doll lines are made without any at all. But yet, however much they don't sell, you're forced to manufacture female dolls in an action figure line. You know, like Spidey and all that. I hate this trend toward feminizing everything, making everything for girls, but yet a decreasing number of things for boys. Nothing can be expressly for boys, even though it clearly appeals to the male interest. It has to be unisex, or girls. And I hate that. I hate it so much. Because, I mean, there just really are certain things besides having a you-know-what that should be seen as exclusively male or masculine. And I'm sure you can imagine what I think they are. And, you know, so basically what I want to title this video is the benefit of the doubts, and how I don't owe anyone the benefit of the doubt. You know, I guess I bought these to appease my need for a male version of Tinkerbell and Rosetta. So yeah. But the benefit of the doubt, I don't have to give anyone the benefit of the doubts. That's what I was trying to say. You know, however many videos I make on the topic, after all these years, I still find new ways to say it. And what I mean, you know, by I don't owe anyone the benefit of the doubt, you know, and I think that's what they figured out on Reddit, which is why I'm simply blocked and have never logged on in years. I don't even remember my password. But I don't owe anyone the benefit of the doubt about anything. And what I mean by that is, I just do not have to accept someone lying to me and telling me, because I mean, that's what they do. They BS you, they blow smoke up your butt, they gaslight you, they point to red herrings, however you want to say it. That is how they deal with confrontation. Yeah, that is how they deal with it. These people that have these fetishes, and, you know, they find ways of writing that into children's content. In fact, one of their greatest thrills in life is in freaking kids and women to a lesser extent out. You know, and that's why if they're attracted to girls, they want much younger girls. You know, they don't want seasoned women like me, you know, and I get these short haircuts so you can't see the gray. But, you know, even if I could dye my hair to where you can't tell there's any gray, they still wouldn't want a pearl-clutching Karen, as we're called, who knows their tricks. You know, they get a thrill, you know, and I mean, the Deeker guy really just outwardly admitted it, that he likes to write about children, content for and about children, because it's unrealistic to think that an adult would freak out the way children, you know, particularly girls, would. You know, they like to freak girls out with the unbelievability of bodily functions. And they can lie until the cows come home, but that's just one of the things they do. And the other thing they like to freak you out about is, you know, effeminacy in males, but obviously that's losing its power, you know, to really scare anyone, one transgender person after another. I mean, women behaving masculinely never really did freak anyone out. But, so they like to freak people out, you know, with their fetishes. But when you get to a certain age, you realize that the best thing you can do is willfully ignore it. And people just develop this amazing ability to willfully ignore things as they get older. You know, but children haven't quite figured out, you know, how to do that. And so they, you know, if they were normal men, they wouldn't be creating children's content. They would want nothing to do with it. You know, they'd be like my own dad, who doesn't know the first thing about children's media and never really did when we were little. You know, but a normal man just doesn't want to make content for and about children. And so you know they're not normal just from that. But I mean, even if they were, you know, let's say they were all a bunch of fundamental Baptists. You know, there, as many people as are involved in these children's shows, I mean, there'd at least be a few of them backslidden enough. I mean, the idea that they would never put anything nasty in it is just ridiculous, because even if they were just all Baptist, you know, you'd still have at least one of them that was backslidden enough to put something nasty in there, even so. And, but, you know, they get a thrill out of putting things in there. You know, if one person out there is shocked by it, then it's worth it to them. So, I don't give anyone the benefit of the doubt. You know, I will continue to read into these cartoons the absolute worst thing imaginable. You know, I mean, the more you look into it, the more you find. And I will continue to believe what I do. And I will not, you know, give them the benefit of the doubt and think that, oh, well, it's nothing. You know, I'm not. I don't give the characters the benefit of the doubt. I don't give the people behind them the benefit of the doubt, you know, especially like, you know, when they've actually admitted to having such fetishes in interviews that went on TV. I don't give them the benefit of the doubt. And, you know, the thing about cartoons is that if you really want to make good cartoons for girls, you don't just feminize boys' crap, you know, and boys' ridiculous level of action and just put a bow or a dress on it. You know, because that's one thing I hate about cartoons. It's like the ridiculous level of action that's just so hard to follow, you know, without pausing it or slowing it down. Just so hard to see what exactly is happening and how. And that is why they were able to slip these things in there for so long. But if you really want to make good content for girls, you first make a good doll, a cute doll, you know, that every girl wants to have. Not that every man wants a girl to have. You know, like instructions on how to dress when she's older. But, you know, dolls that girls would actually spend all their allowance money if they had to get. Such as a Terence doll about twice this tall. And, you know, if I had $200 of free money and there was a Terence on the 1/6 scale, you know, like a skipper boy, and he was like, you know, like I said, about that high, I mean, I would totally buy him. And I was this close to buying a Mo doll, you know, from Mia and Me, which I never watched, I never got into, but because he has blue or purple hair and purple eyes, which doesn't make any sense, you know, Because I never watched that stupid show or had the girl dolls. You know, he was like the 1 out of 5 that's a boy, you know, the token boy, and totally gay. I think he was a little after the time when Sophia the First was introduced. You know, because it was just such a stupid doll. I decided that a Christmas elf, a Target Christmas elf that I never got to see because I don't shop Target, was a better alternative. You know, because at least I could choose a name better than Mo, and he wouldn't have stupid purple eyes. But yeah, the way to make good content for girls is to start out with good dolls. Something that would translate well into a 3D doll. Then animate those dolls and write stories about things you can imagine them doing. That's how you make good content for girls. You know, this formula of, you know, taking what the boys watch and making a pink glittery version of it with fairy wings and dresses and bows. You know, basically a fairy version of Spider-Man or something. that doesn't work, and it doesn't make any sense. You know, because the reality about life, you know what the reality is about life? Is that men are the ones that have problems with bodily functions, with the body and how it functions. Men are the ones who actually have problems with how the human body functions. I mean, just denying that the other half ever has to poop, you know, that's stupid in and of itself. But men are the ones, you know, that suffer from things like enuresis and encapresis, which, as I've stated before, is a direct result of holding yourself until your brain just stops knowing how to read your body's signals. You know, it isn't your bladder is too small. It's because you hold yourself, you know, past the point when you no longer can. And you get used to that. Men are the ones, you know, that have issues with toilet training when they're little and unnatural ideas about bodily fluids and functions. Men are the ones that don't want to change their own kids when they have them. Men are the ones that don't want to clean litter boxes and pick up after dogs. You know, men are the ones that create these stupid fantasy worlds, you know, wherein mythical animals and, you know, wizards and sorcerers have magical ways of dealing with their bodily fluids, you know. It has to magically disappear for them to be okay with that world. And men are the ones that create movies wherein you never see a toilet ever. Women, you know, just think of bodily functions in such a way that, you know, it's just a normal part of life, like eating. And before I was told that girls don't poop, you know, that never would have occurred to me, that both genders didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? Because we see little boys get their diapers changed. We may even have to do it if they're our brothers. You know, we see bodily fluids and functions through the lens of someone who can create another human body inside us. You know, we talk to our moms in the bathroom when we were little. And moms, you know, were more likely to talk to us about their own bodily functions because we were both girls, you see. And so we see bodily fluids and functions unless and until men teach us to see them differently. You know, which is why a lot of times, you know, girls that do have such fetishes, so to speak, number one, it's often not about themselves. You know, if we're fantasizing about poop, it's not about ourselves. It's only because, like, I see it, in my case, as the worst thing that could ever happen to a villain in particular. You know, and I don't get that. Why so many people like to draw the protagonist in a diaper, you know, like Sophia the First, but yet my pictures from the actual show where Cedric is literally pooping himself on purpose, nobody puts any likes on them. Nobody likes that. Nobody comments on it, you know, because I see it as humiliation, not something people do for pleasure. And I think that's part of the issue, this mental block about Angelica doing it, is they don't want the act to be vilified. You know, they don't want that to be associated with villains and like a bad thing that happens to you as a punishment. They want it to be a pleasurable thing that the protagonist does. But that's just not how the story was written. That's not my interpretation of it, never will be. And so, men are the ones that have a problem with bodily functions and seeing them in a normal light. And men are the ones that dump their girlfriends for farting. I mean, not that anyone should do that in their clothes. Yeah, it's not us that has a problem with these things. It's men that teach us to have a problem with these things. I mean, it was only my male teachers that I really feared asking to use the bathroom, and not so much because they would tell me no, but just because at a subconscious level, I knew to be self-conscious about that. You know what I'm saying? I never felt that way about my bodily functions with female teachers. And so, when I get in a female's class, I had no issue asking her to use the bathroom, or puedo ir al baño in Spanish class. Always a female Spanish teacher. So yeah, men are the ones that have problems with bodily functions and not seeing them the right way. And it's so ironic that they have these fetishes and will deliberately poop their pants on purpose to be like a baby, but yet they don't want to change their own kids. It's true. I mean, women, pooping was just something you did sitting on the toilet, just like peeing. And that's why, a lot of times if girls, have such fetishes, it's not usually about ourselves, and it's also later onset. Men, I mean, as disgusting as this is, there's 3-year-old boys will steal their younger brother's diapers and put them on and literally poop in them. How they find the willpower to do that after being toilet trained, I do not understand, because it takes a lot of effort to poop just in the toilet, where you have the seat helping it out. But if women do such things, they're usually coerced to do them by boyfriends who have such fetishes, or they discover these things later after going through puberty and realizing that, hey, I'd like to see a villain humiliated in the worst possible way. So go ahead and post this video.